Greetings, millionaires and future millionaires. I'm Lane Bean, the co-founder of Pilot Legacy Private Equity Group, a real estate investment business focusing on multifamily investments for individual investors like you and me. Today I'm going to talk to you for about 7 or 8 minutes on a topic that is essential to good real estate investing. That topic is understanding the real estate cycle and pairing that with the right financial strategy. So there's a couple points that I want to make, and then we'll get right into the topic. One thing is there's 4 phases of the real estate cycle that they start from bad to good. And during those phases that we'll cover in just 1 minute, you can make money in every cycle. But you have to have the right strategy and the right game plan. This is the equivalent of a football game in the last quarter with 5 seconds left on the clock, down by 7 points and 40 yards from the end zone. If I ran the perfect play, a dive up the middle, and executed that with perfection, we would still lose the game because the strategy is not right. That's the same analogy in real estate. Where we are in the game is important to understanding the right play call and the right strategy. So let me get right into that. The real estate cycles. I'd like to bring to your attention a slide that'll help you understand that. This slide defines the real estate cycle. And there's generally 4 phases of that. The recovery phase, the expansion phase, the hypersupply, and the recession phase. So let's talk about each one of those. The very first recovery phase is a seller's market. The typical things we can expect to see in a recovery phase are low or negative rent growth and high occupancy. That transitions on an upward incline to continue the seller's market into the expansion phase. The expansion phase of real estate cycle is when you see more demand in the market than you see in supply. A growing demand for investments and a growing demand for multifamily housing. That's typically indicated by rent growths that are increasing. During that phase, what strategies do we pair with expansion? And that's a good time to implement a value add strategy. Buy an underperforming asset and increase the rents through some type of improvement because you have a natural trend toward rent increases or rent growth increases. As the amount of housing supply and the amount of demand for housing becomes an equilibrium, we transition from the expansion to the hypersupply. And that may be a result of overbuilding. It may be an economic impact of fewer people looking for new jobs, moving to different areas, or a variety of conditions that equalize that supply and demand balance. In the hypersupply, you generally see a rent growth begin to modulate, level off, or maybe even a low or negative rent growth. In the hypersupply, the best strategy is that core strategy. In other words, buy a top quality asset or implement a top quality asset that already has a good occupancy level and then count on that occupancy level with credit-worthy tenants to ride through the hypersupply and the recession phase. And then the final cycle of real estate is recession. And we see this is the time to be in a buyer's position or a buyer's market. You can generally find deep discounted properties in the recession phase because owners are underwater. And what we see there is high occupancy. The amount of demand for new housing exceeds, or the amount of demand is exceeded by supply. In other words, there's more housing available and fewer people wanting to buy it. So rents go down, occupancy goes down also. So those are the 4 cycles of real estate and how they impact different strategies. And now let's look at where we are nationally or where we've been historically so that we can pair the right strategy with our financial designs. So this slide shows a historical model of where we are in the real estate cycle. And you can see beginning in 2002, we experienced a period of expansion that continued through 2008, and the housing changes that occurred in 2008 put us into that hypersupply and put us into a housing recession through 2008, 9, and 10. That was a good time, if you remember, to buy real estate. It bottomed out in 2012 and began that additional cycle of recovery in 2014, 15, and has continued aggressively until we see the impacts of COVID-19 in 2020. And that's caused that moderate to low rent growth to be present. Supply and demand are in balance, and there's just a difficult part to make smart investments because of the uncertainty of the future ahead of us. So you can see that we've had a long uprun in the expansion period, and that's bringing into question what is the right strategy now to execute, and what strategy do we want to focus on to get correctly. So let's look at where we are right now and try to identify what those items could be. So the market indications, as you see right now, I believe we're in that decline period. And the reason that I bring that up is the indicators are falling rent growth or negative rent growth. In fact, one of the national property management teams expect the year 2020 to be a -3 rent growth because of the economic impacts of COVID-19, and they expect 2021 to be another flat rent growth period because of the national economy. Vacancies still appear to be very strong, and the demand for good properties, okay, is slightly decreased from previous calendar year, but again, it shows some consistency. So what strategy do we want to execute at this point of the real estate cycle, and how can we best position our capital? And looking back at that first slide, or refreshing, is we want to look for those discounted projects. We want to be an opportunistic buyer, and we want to try the very best investments that we can afford in a main location and prepare those for the next expansion period. So that's the objective of today's lesson, is to understand those real estate cycles, recognize where we are currently in the economy, and then identify that turning point, pairing all of that knowledge with the correct real estate strategy so that we can become wiser investors and better millionaires. Well, I hope you've taken something away from that today. And if you'd like to reach out to me to learn more about my financial investment strategies or discuss more about real estate cycles or the economy, please do so. You can reach me at pilot-legacy.com, which is our website, or email me at lane.bean@pilot-legacy.com. Until then, good luck investing, and I'm looking forward to helping you become a better millionaire.